Be nice, everyone.
Okay. Hi, it's 7:30 on, where am I? Oh, there you are. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
In the absence of Mike Ailes, I'm Ken Gammerman. I'm Vice Chair of the Finance Board, and it's my pleasure to call this March 21st, 2021 meeting.
June 21st, Ken.
June 21st. First item on the agenda would be public forum. Is there anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? Not hearing anyone, we'll proceed with the minutes of the last meeting of May 17th. Are there any questions or comments about those minutes? I have one on page 8. Just a misspelling. They left the A off Mr. Trotter's name on page 8, and we want to just have that little typo corrected. Anything else on the minutes of May 11th?
Just at the top of page 8, where it says Mr. Trotter expressed concerns for, I should say concerns for the taxpayers. I think that's what his concern was with regard. Just, it's a little typo.
I think he means the taxpayer.
I think it could be taxpayers plural or for the taxpayer,
You choose it. It's
whichever.
the quote attributed to you.
I don't know if I can even remember exactly how I phrased it, but it was something like that. So I agree with the general meaning.
Okay, let's call it taxpayers.
All right.
Are there any other comments or corrections for the May 17th minutes? We will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody. We'll proceed then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Standing Building Committee. Did you all get the minutes for May 11th? I just
Yes.
picked up. Wait,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that led directly into June 1st, so perhaps we can discuss those two sets of minutes together. Are there any comments that you have on that?
I've got, I guess, a comment question. And it's really about some of these concerns about the solar project at Baldwin. And I was trying to read the minutes to get caught up on a conversation about the roof is not 20 years old yet. So that doesn't give us a full subsidy, I believe, from the state. And this notion that maybe we should wait to do the roof work and do the solar work at the same time. And I guess what I was curious about, because I think someone made a great suggestion, might have been Rob last meeting. He said, can we put the solar on the ground? And what I was curious about is, can we put the solar on the ground to complete the performance contract and then put off the work to do the roof and then also do the solar at Baldwin down the road, maybe outside of the performance contract?
Mr. Vice Chairman, if I could comment for a minute, and I'll probably ask Dave DeMayo to pipe in here. Jonathan, the extent to which we would have to go to install ground-based systems versus a roof-based systems are substantially different and probably significantly more expensive because we have to anchor them into the ground. But more importantly, we've had some conversations between the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, Cliff Gurnham, the superintendent, and Dave DeMayo, relative to putting together a full-blown cost analysis on putting it on the roof, accounting for the fact that we are going to get less money from the state for the roof replacement, but we will still be able to pick up the ZREC credits from the energy performance contract. So that kind of analysis is currently in the works. Good suggestions on trying to put it down on the ground. I think Baldwin is probably one of the least desirable places to put it on the ground because of the geography and the layout. And in fact, we'd probably take away the only playing fields there, which are the Little League fields to the, to the west side, not west side of the west of the school, up closest to Long Hill. So, but there, Jonathan, your point's well taken. We are exploring the options, but clearly we think there's an opportunity for us to do to put it on the roof and still get the credits as well as a certain portion from the state. So that analysis will be coming, and we'll be sharing it with you guys, obviously.
Okay,
Mary
thank you.
Jane or Dave, do you want to comment on that?
I'd be happy just to chime in on the ZREC. The ZREC is the real trump card. The town is right now eligible for 15-year, $14,500 a year ZREC payment. And that there's rumblings that the state, as there always is on an annual basis, for the ZRECs to end. I think this time they're for real. So letting the ZRECs expire and hoping to get another maybe 5% on the roof reimbursement from the state, I just don't think is good business for the town. You're going to be much better off to get this solar project going and really lock in those ZRECs. Like I said, that's 15 years times $14,500 a year. That's a pretty good piece of change. The other comment of putting it on the ground is the town would have to do a pretty good assessment of capital development up on that property, because there is some talk about possibly moving the middle school up there. I think it's Adams at some point, and we would hate to steal land from good developable lands for that future project if it were come to be, and you'd hate to have to take the solar down and lose it. So I think you guys are in a good position. The town's in a good position to really capitalize on this and get the best of both worlds at this point in time.
Sounds like you guys had a healthy discussion. Sounds like you're
We
figuring
really
it out.
did.
Best
did.
benefit. Yep.
Yes.
Is there any questions that anyone would like to raise on the item 6? Updates on Cox and Lakes? 6 and 7. How is that going? There we're talking about 1.4 million and 1.38 million to do the HVAC upgrades. Are we pretty well committed on that?
Yes, the Board of Selectmen approved both of those projects at our June meeting. And there are some conversations that are starting to formulate around the contractor's ability to get the work done in the originally allocated time frame, owing to the challenge with building materials and supplies to actually finish the job. Dave, I don't know if you're at all familiar with that, but
I am. As early as recent as this afternoon, I had a discussion with Cliff about that, and we're going to hold a special meeting this coming Tuesday evening to bat that around a little bit, because there is some rumblings that material, and we experience it every day, material procurement is very, very difficult and unpredictable. Even though we're getting lead times from manufacturers, at least what I've been experiencing is that they're not always able to meet those dates. There may be a resource that they're waiting for parts from to assemble their equipment that doesn't come in, and then that gets delayed. So we're having some discussions about how best handle that. So I think I'll I'll leave that at that right at the moment. And we're gonna have a special meeting next Tuesday night to see what may be the best way to go. There is some discussion about locking in the contracts, having the contractors order the material and store the material, and maybe have the work started after the 2022 school year, where we wouldn't have to be waiting for material to already be in hand, and you can guarantee a completion date through the summer. Cliff has to chime in on the ability of his thoughts on the ability of the equipment to take another winter.
Yeah, Dave, your points are very well taken. Is there another concern? I recall from the Board of Selectmen meeting in early June that part of this project would include, if we started it relatively soon and the completion date was November, that we would have to be renting some kind of equipment to provide temporary heating and cooling. And that if we started this project now, disabled the current heating and cooling, that would be on the hook for a longer period of time with some kind of equipment rentals?
We could be there. There's money in the budget, as there always is, for temporary heating and cooling for the shoulder months that the system may not be up and running. So yes, you're absolutely right. We've got money in the budget for that, but if we don't have to spend it, that's good.
Yeah.
There was
And
some.
I would think we'd also have a problem, well, as part of your discussion on where we would store this equipment until we could put it in.
You're absolutely right. That's a discussion Cliff is going to have with the low bidders of both projects now, so that we can be prepared to have that information for next Tuesday's special meeting.
I got one more question. Hopefully it's a short one. And just apologize, kind of going back to item 5 again. Just had a question mark next to the third paragraph. It said, it basically said if we had JCI do the project, they think it would cost about 2.5 million roughly. But if we had the town manage the project, we thought it would cost about 3 million. And that's just struck me as a pretty big difference, over $500,000.
Those numbers are, I believe those numbers are reversed. I just picked that up tonight when I was reviewing the meeting minutes.
Okay,
If the town were to manage the project, the fees or the dollars are 2.5, and JCI, if we run it through JCI, it's the 3 million, and that struck me. It is, whichever way you look at it, it's a lot of money to have JCI manage that project. And one of the questions we threw out to discuss is, do we really need JCI to manage this project?
okay,
End of the day, it's a roofing project and a solar project. And you have a solar consultant on board already with the town. And whoever gets the engineering and the design work for the roof work can certainly manage it on the town's behalf for a fraction of that.
okay. That makes more sense. And maybe that's a good discussion. Maybe that can find some savings if it's doable.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that better now. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The reference to PV involves solar, totally solar. Is that correct?
Photovoltaic.
The PV, the note we're referring to at the top of page 2, the cost of the full project, including roof and PV.
The PV is the solar, Ken.
It's a solar, it's photovoltaic solar, yes.
So we ought to get those two numbers reversed.
I will do that when we go to accept the meeting minutes at our next regular meeting. I'll see if we can do it at the special meeting, but certainly at the latest to be the next regular meeting, and we'll reissue them to the Board of Finance.
Any comment anyone has on the item 6, which is on the Cox and Lakes HVAC?
I think we've already covered that earlier.
I raised it earlier and I just wondered where we were. Okay, are there any further questions of Dave who's here?
Has the work started on the field replacement up at the high school? I know they were looking to get it started right away, but I don't know.
I believe today was the start date. Yes, I can't tell you if it actually started, but today was the kickoff date, yes.
Terrific.
And the estimated completion of that project?
I believe it's mid-October, if I remember right. Schedules are adjusted such that the football or any sport team planning to use that would be away games up to that point.
Mhm. Good. Are there any further questions that anyone has on the report of the Standing Building Committee? Okay. Thank you, Dave, again for being here.
My pleasure.
Your presence each month is terrific.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
you're welcome. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank-
Of course, you're welcome to stay for the rest of this enjoyable meeting.
Thank you. I think there's a glass of wine waiting for me upstairs.
There you go. I'll be over.
All right, come on.
No,
All right.
you have to stay here. Okay, let's move on to the pension committee. Are there any observations on that? Happen to notice that for the first time, we've got the OPEB trust update in there, which includes the representatives of all interested parties in item 4.2. Anyone have any thing to weigh in? Do you, Bob Hartman, as our new representative over there?
I'd love to tell you it was fascinating. But we're not quite there yet. It's still, it's managed by the pension committee and the trustees. I mean, I called Mary Jane afterwards and said, you realize I just seconded a motion, and as a trustee, you can't even do that. So, I'm on it. I tend to go to the meetings. Everything's going very smoothly. They have an opening on the committee now, the pension committee, because a fellow resigned. So please tell your friends and smart people who might want to donate their time. But it's good to have this up and running and turning the corner. And of course, as always, Mary Jane is doing the heavy lifting on this.
I got a question, Ken. I haven't seen the Board of Education minutes from May 24th, but did you pick your new representative, Dr. Balistraci?
Yes, Dr. Hirsch is our representative to the OPEB Trust.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I had about this set of minutes was I was a little bit curious about the pension obligation bonds. I really just kind of wanted to understand, why that cost benefit analysis doesn't work. So they're not attractive to us, I think is what I gained from the minutes. And maybe Mary Jane might want to take that on.
Yeah, of course, I gave, probably close to an hour.
Oh, it was only an hour.
Discussion
Okay.
on that during the meeting. The bottom line is all the reasons that towns typically would pursue pension obligation bonds do not equate to Guilford. We're in a really good position, and the cons moving forward with that, in my opinion, outweighed the benefits.
Okay.
Jonathan, if I could, I was the one that sent us on that little fishing expedition. I attended I'm not sure who was the sponsoring organization, but a webinar, a Zoom meeting where our fiduciary participated relative to what they're doing in West Hartford with pension obligation bonds. The word is pension obligation bonds can be used not just for distressed municipalities who are having trouble with their pension obligations, but as Mary Jane just said, there are a bunch of mitigating factors in terms of control that the state has, et cetera. But more importantly, the one that I think is an overriding concern for us is that the way we currently handle some of our pension our pension obligation bonds I'm just gonna leave it at that. Yeah, Mary Jane, you're right. I should probably back off on this. Jonathan, the numbers did not make sense. The loss of control did not make sense. But it seemed like a good idea at the time. So we engaged our fiduciary, who Bob is very familiar with, who was one of the presenters at the particular meeting I was participating in.
No,
Yeah, the bottom line for me is, we're at a pretty decent funding ratio. And, that communities such as West Hartford are using pension obligation bonds to bring their funding ratio up. And we don't really have that need at this point. And like Matt alluded to, the state has a heavy hand in pension obligation bonds, and having them tie us down with our pension just didn't seem like the right way to go.
so in other words, these are used in lieu of contributions, so it tops the money up right away.
Correct.
I have kind of a hypothetical question, though. I should have asked this sooner. If in a hypothetical situation, if we were to offer a payout to everybody in the defined benefit pension program, and we, had to meet the difference between the amount we're funded and 100%, if they all took it at once, would that fall under the category of pension obligation, or would that be a different debt issuance?
Good question.
Good question. I mean, if we needed to, yeah, I guess it would be pension obligation, still be pension obligation bond. But, even if you're saying lump summing everybody, or is that?
Yeah,
what you mean?
hypothetically.
Yeah, anybody who would have their pension sweetened is probably still entitled to a lump sum. You're absolutely right, Bob. So the cost there, the cost analysis there is how many people would it affect, and could the current portfolio withstand a mass, mass is an unfair word, but a large scale option on one-time payments.
Right.
So we can play with those numbers, and
Yeah, I mean,
That's a scenario I hope we would not have.
but if it were to, just again, I hate to press on it, but if it extinguished the obligation because
right.
there's nothing further, is it still in this, under this program? Anyway, we can
Right.
figure this out later.
The difference would be whether or not we would need to raise money to
Keep
meet that
going.
obligation of paying everybody out. If
Keep
we
going.
didn't have enough in there to pay everybody out, then yes, it would still be a pension obligation bond.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further?
Interesting.
Okay, we'll move on to the Board of Education's report. Linda, are you somewhere around?
I'm here.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good evening.
Mm.
So I'm going to be doing the report with the assistance of Dr. Balistraci helping me out. For the month of May, our expenditures were $5,781,061.20. That represents 86.11% of our budget compared to the prior year of 82.48%. The big revenue for May was the final payment of our excess cost grant. And the really good news is that this came in much higher than we had anticipated. The actual payment came in at 80.3%. We had been predicting 69% all year. So that was very good news for us. We haven't seen a ratio like that since 2014, 2015. So it's been a long time since we've gotten a reimbursement rate that high. The other little bit of revenue was from the Medicaid program. Some other things that I'd like to point out, if you look at the medical line under employee benefits, it's higher than the prior year, and that's because June's payment was already included in with the May report. We had done a disbursement right at the end of May, and that bill accidentally got put into May instead of in June. By the end of the year, end of June, when we close out, that account will be more in line. We are expecting a $8,756 reimbursement from the E-rate Universal Service Fund for the fiber lines that we put in at Adams and Baldwin. When we did our original filing, we didn't have those as part of the plan, but they were eligible under our plan. So those funds were received in June after the report was issued. The tuition, I sent you out the tuition report earlier tonight. That has some very good news on it based on that higher reimbursement that we received from the excess cost grant. So right now tuition is projected to be $230,000 under budget. It is a little change from what I reported last month, but that is just due to the allocation of the excess cost grant. I actually moved more of it to the special ed transportation line as a credit there instead of all to tuition. And our other good news is the ESSER 2 grant application was approved. I've submitted a request for the $522,000. That is all going to cover salaries for additional positions that were added due to COVID. So we should be getting that money end of June, early July, hopefully, but it will all be credited to this year. Those are the only things that I wanted to point out, unless you have some questions on the expenditure summary.
Real quick on the revenue.
Mhm.
Grant, did they give you any reason why it was higher, or is it just, here's what it is and take it or leave it?
The only explanation I got was that everybody's claims were lower. So for a lot of other districts, they had students that had reduced costs because they were attending remotely. Transportation costs were down because students weren't being transported to schools. So those lower costs meant there was more money for everybody to go around. It's the only explanation that I've been able to get from the state.
Okay. Well, I'm not complaining about it. I was just.
I'm not either.
Yeah,
Can you quickly explain the two lines on ESSER 2 and ESSER 2 state set aside? You know, 400, almost 433 on ESSER 2. And you said at one point you were estimating 500, and when you add the 90 state set aside, you're over 500. Is that correct?
Yes. So at one point, the state had miscalculated the ESSER 2 allocations, and they had sent out the information to all the districts. So what the state has done is they took the extra money from that we had originally told we were getting from some of their other funds, and they're calling it the state set aside to make it whole to the amount that we had been originally told we would receive. So it's $522,000 total, coming in just two different little pieces, or two pieces.
Good.
They're not little.
Not little at all. I have a question that goes off these, off of the statistics here a bit, to the Board of Ed's Operations Committee item. This was a meeting of May 10th, and on the dining services report, which showed a total loss for the year, and we know there are a lot of reasons for that, but it showed the total loss of $323,000. Is there any further explanation of that? Are we expected, how is it going to be reversed? How are we going to have an operating dining services in the new school year that would be more reasonable, that won't require these heavy infusions of cash as the new year gets underway?
So we're going to end the year with quite a loss, just like every other district in the state that has a dining service program. The amount of funds that we receive for the meals that we are providing to the students does not cover our operating costs. And every district is having the same issue. And we're hoping that next year we will be allowed to do some additional things such as a la carte meals and some a la carte sales that will help bring in some revenue to try and offset some of these deficits. But we have to try and cover these deficits until the program can pick back up.
So,
Mr. Vice Chair, if I wouldn't mind, if you wouldn't mind the question, is it the anticipation that the Board of Education is going to continue to run the dining services without charging students for meals?
A determination has not been made, and I don't know, Katie, if you want to jump in on this one.
No, I think that I was just going to echo, Linda, exactly what you just said. A determination has not been made, and we are waiting to understand what the state is guiding as we move forward. But Linda, you may have more to add.
Yeah, I mean, the state has provided those waivers. They've provided that option. But we are still looking at what exactly other guidance we are going to get as to whether or not we determine whether we are going to stick with what we're doing or do some kind of modification to that plan or return to fully paid meals. Nothing has been decided yet because we haven't received any more information from the state.
okay. Any other questions for the Board of Education? I had 2 warrant questions.
Okay, before we go on to that, can we talk about the projections memo that I sent you? There was a separate memo. There were 2 attachments that I sent you today. One has the projections for June. At this point, we are projecting that we are not going to need a special appropriation to close out the year. The projections memo that I sent you shows right now that we believe we are going to end the year with a surplus of just under $70,000. That does include the prior year excess cost funds that were received by the town. If we don't ask for those funds, we would end the year with about $30,000 returned to the town at this point. So that is our very good news on a very difficult year of trying to manage costs.
That's great.
It's great news. May I ask just a quick question to see if you have a sense of timing? You know, it's kind of a catch-all category called custodial, and of course it's, you know, it's running awfully hot, has run very hot for over a year. And it's all the extra cleaning and it's all the extra maintenance and it's all the extra time and money spent. Do you get the sense that the pressure is letting up on that now? Or is that going to start to fall off now? Are we there yet?
I apologize. I couldn't hear the beginning of your question. I had a very large truck drive by right outside my house.
It's about custodial, Linda. It's about, you know,
okay.
It's been running so hot for so long and it's kind of a catch-all, but we all kind of know what goes in there and it's all COVID related, all the, you know, the excess. And you said the word projection. So that made me think, you know, are we at that point? Are we projecting? Can we put our finger, can you put your finger yet on how that's going to play out? Are those costs starting to tail off now?
They're starting to tail off. We did purchase some additional dividers that are going to be needed for hopefully having students in the cafeterias to eat lunch at the high school, mainly at the high school. I think we purchased a few for Adams. But the other cleaning products I have tapered off. We're still going to have to buy hand sanitizer. We're still going to have to buy, you know, wipes, but I think it's not going to be to the volume that we had bought before.
Yeah, and things like it's still big monthly charges to heat the tents. Is that because it's an annual contract, or is that something are we still heating them, or is that something we don't have to do this summer?
We won't be heating the tents and again into the fall.
Yeah.
So the rental of the heaters, I believe they've been returned.
Good. And then curiously, maybe I should wait till later. Has anybody from the Ag Society asked you about the availability of those, purchasing those tents?
Not that I am aware of.
It seems to be a big problem for the Guilford Fair this year. They're short tents. So everybody who had tents to offer sold them to school systems.
Yeah. I know a few of our schools have already asked about making sure that they were keeping them because they do use them. So I don't know if we're ready to sell them back yet. I think maybe one of them at the high school was talked about not being kept. But I'm not sure if they, because the high school has two. I'm not sure if the high school is going to keep them or not.
Right. I was told they were gonna give you a call and see what was available. I guess that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, or they've reached out to Mr. Gurnham and he hasn't said anything to me.
Is there an expectation that the bus monitors will be an ongoing expense for next year as well, or is that gonna taper off as well? Or is it too soon to tell?
That will taper off. We will always have monitors on the bus because we need them for other reasons. So we will always have bus monitors, but it won't be to the volume that we had before. We've always included bus monitors in our budget.
And perhaps to state the obvious, these are all really good questions. You know, we're not quite sure entirely what the fall looks like, right? I mean, you know, we expect to have most of our student body not yet vaccinated. We don't know what the state guidance will be in terms of what requirements will be in the buildings. Certainly, we hope it will be more normal than it has been for a long time. But as you can imagine, we'll be learning more as the summer goes on.
Do we have any estimate on what the level of vaccination is among the students?
I don't think we do. You know, I'm simply basing my comments on the fact that obviously the majority of students are not eligible for vaccination, and unless one of the vaccinations becomes something that younger kids can get, we are again heading into the school system with most of our kids not yet vaccinated.
Mr. Vice Chairman, if I would, the state is currently only tracking the age bands 15 to 44, 45 to 64, and 65 plus in terms of the vaccine penetration rate. So the answer is no, but vaccines are currently available to those above the age of 12. You know, the numbers I was working on which are state-based numbers that I was working on when it was 16, there were roughly 4,000 children under the age of 16 in Guilford. So you can start to extrapolate the math, and you're exactly right, Dr. Balistraci. There is nothing currently on the horizon that I have seen in the news that says they're going to be dropping that age rate down anytime soon.
And even at age 15, we ought to have some sense of where we are in the high school.
No, they don't track. The data that's currently provided by the state does not track to that micro level.
Okay. Very
Did
good.
any of the vaccines have a FDA approval, or did any of them have a BLA yet?
Not for below age 12, right, Dr. Balistraci?
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, I mean, I thought to date they're only approved for emergency use, right?
Oh, yes, and that is my understanding as well. So they are not available to our youngest population, and I believe they are still kind of provided on an emergency basis under that language.
I will give you an interesting statistic. The 15 to 44-year-old band has a higher first and fully vaccinated rate than the 45 to 64. Don't know if that is reflective of the fact that every high school kid over the age of 15 immediately went out and got their vaccination rate, or there's a reluctance in the 45 to 64 range, but that is at a higher rate currently than, as I said, 15 to 44 is at a higher rate than 45 to 64.
Any further questions do we have on the board? Anyone?
Mr. Gamerman, if I may, I just want to acknowledge, and I did this at our Board of Ed meeting, our most recent Board of Ed meeting, but I just want to acknowledge the incredible work of Mrs. Trudeau and her staff. As you well know, there were a fair number of unexpected COVID expenses for Guilford Public Schools this past year in order to keep our students safe. And the ability to, on this date, come to you and let you know that we do not appear to need a special appropriation is not a place I expected to be. And I really want to publicly thank Mrs. Trudeau and her staff for getting us to this point.
Here.
Well appreciated.
Much so.
Any questions anyone has on any of the warrants included in this month's report from the Board of Ed? Anything? I have one. Page 9. I'm sure it's justified. I'm not quite sure how that's extended. Page 9 of the warrants, physical therapy and sports medicine. Is that an annual contract that we have? Because the spring payment was $10,560 on that.
Yes, that is an annual contract that is paid in 3 installments. They do fall sports, winter sports, and spring sports. So we pay them 3 installments every year. And it's a contract that we've been doing for a while with them.
It hasn't been modified by any of the constrictions that we've had in this year?
It was earlier in the year. The payments were a little different earlier in the year. And then the end of last year, we didn't pay the spring at all, or very little of it. So we did modify it because of COVID, but for the spring sports that have been up and running, we've made the spring payment.
Okay. I have a number here to submit to the board for its acknowledgement. We don't quite approve these, but we acknowledge them. The number that I have here is for the Board of Ed for May, $4,158,969. Is that does that coincide with yours? It was included in the town papers that we got.
Now, our expenditures for May are $5,781,061.20.
That's what you're putting in for us to acknowledge, then we would submit that for acknowledgement, for approval. What accounts for the difference? Is it a gross figure?
So part of this, like I said, with the medical bill for June being included in May, there was a disbursements that was done that included both May expenditures and June expenditures, and I believe the fund transfer went down to the town for June because that's when the checks were actually issued. But some of the expenditures were posted to May and some were posted to June, and that accounts for the difference.
So this board will acknowledge the 4,158,000 number?
No, it should be the $5,781,061.20. That's on my cover memo.
Okay, well, all in favor of acknowledging that?
So moved.
Second.
The rest of us, we all agree to that. So that is the number.
Aye.
All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We're done with that. We move on to the town side. And Mary Jane, can you give us your report, please?
First, I have to apologize for my golden glow. If I shut my light off, I can't see my work. If I put it on, I got this glow on me that I've been trying to get rid of. But Anyway, I have quite a bit of information to pass along to you today. I'll start with revenues, Vice Chair, if that's fine.
Yes, please.
Okay, as of the end of May, our revenues are at 99.8% as compared to 100.5 at this time last year. Interest income continues to be very low. Just as a side, last month, the state's short-term investment fund bottomed out at 0%. So it's just a representation of where this account is headed. And the fact that it will take quite a while for us to get back to where it was in 2019 prior. As I projected last month, the tax department has met their budget for this year, and we still have one more month to go. There was a holdup getting the tax bills out. If anybody's wondering why they don't have their tax bill, there was an issue with the software for the elderly tax program, but I was told that tax bills were supposed to be in today's mail, so should be getting those shortly. The fire department is already over 94%, so they are on target to meet their revenue goal this year. The final grant from the state of Connecticut was just received on June 12th, which covers the May outstanding budget deficit that you see for the other state payments. As of last week, so revenue through last week, the middle of June, the balance left to collect in our revenue budget was under $150,000 for the year. It is my expectation that we will meet our revenue projection without the need to transfer from undesignated fund balance as budgeted. So extremely positive news on the revenue front on the town side as well.
Question.
Questions?
Sorry, Veronica, go ahead.
Nothing, I was just commenting, that's great considering how cautious and nervous we all were this year. So I'm very pleased.
One question, let's be greedy. If we're at 100% of the tax collection, where do you think we'll be when the books close?
I would anticipate we wouldn't bring in as much as we brought in May. So overall, for the month of May, the tax collector brought in $275,000. So, you know, somewhere around 150 maybe. But I'm just thrilled that we met our projection for tax. Even if we didn't bring in another dollar, no,
Yeah,
I'd be happy.
agreed.
I got a question about the selectman line. Yep, I see that he's $195,000 or so over on his revenue. And I heard was because he gave up drinking coffee. Right?
We had some tag
just a
sales.
rumor.
Those are the energy performance grant credits that we received back.
You know, I actually did remember that, and I wanted to confirm it, but there's really a follow-up question. And that is that, you know, I've always been concerned how the school's been doing with some of their special ed projects when they bought some special ed in-house and they started having some costs that came in-house and then some reductions in cost for outplacements and so forth. And, you know, they sort of made an investment, and I was always curious if it works. So I kept kind of pressuring them during the meetings, you know, can you do a little separate accounting and show that it's working? And I kind of have that same feeling about the performance contract. You know, it was a pretty significant investment, and I'm wondering if there's a way to kind of do a little accounting of it to show that, yeah, you know, this is really working. I suspect that it is, and I suspect that it's pretty hard to figure out. And I know that we're waiting for a professional engineering report eventually that may show us some of these numbers, but I think that might be a worthwhile thing to show an accounting for. So just kind of a request that it may be kind of difficult, so I don't want to.
Well, Jonathan, you'll remember that when we were putting together the budget, there were a number of departments that had significant decreases in their requests for utilities, and that would be a direct effect of the energy performance grant.
But Jonathan, you're absolutely right. We are still waiting, as you heard tonight, the discussion about putting the the last solar project on Baldwin. So we have not yet fully completed the energy performance contract. We have some preliminary numbers that we may be able to share with you if Johnson Controls and more importantly, our consultant is willing to share those. But at this point, there's still a number of punch list items at the school. And they have been analyzing the savings in our energy accounts. So we will have a report for you at some point.
Okay. I think it's gonna actually be pretty positive.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
Are there any other questions on revenue?
Good job from the golf course.
No
Yes.
kidding.
Absolutely. And then with another month to go at even, so,
Well, they're kind of telling me they might break even, which is what we don't see. What a lot of people don't see is we look at the revenue side and then we change the report and then we look at the expenses. We don't really realize that some departments in town are set up just to have expenses. We don't expect revenues from them. In the case of the golf course, it's set up. We anticipate that its expenses will be $80,000-$90,000 more than its revenues in a given year. But this year, it looks like they're going to come in 90, they're going to close that gap completely, which I think is fabulous.
I agree.
okay.
Not usually the case.
Ken,
And
you want to go back to Bill Meisman saying that the golf course was
No.
going to be a profit center?
Oh, there were too many years when we were anticipating an evaporating profit center there.
Well, there were some of us who never agreed with that concept, but
Right.
Where is that swimming pool anyway?
it's in Brantford.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Okay, enough of the trip down memory lane. Let's move
Yeah.
along.
not my
Any-
memory. Don't know any about those
Your
people.
memory, Paul. You're too young for that memory.
Yes, indeed, Mary Jane.
Yes, that's what I'm gonna take as my answer. I'm too young. I'm gonna move on to expenses. Expenses as of May 31st are at 87.8% compared to 85.8% this time last year. And I would like to address a number of the departments that are currently showing over budget at this time. First of all, information systems is over about 13,000. However, there is more than $25,000 worth of expenditures that would be covered at year end from the Reserve for Technology account. There were a number of items that were approved by the first selectman to move forward, specifically related to COVID expenditures and making sure our Zoom rooms and all of that were up and about. So items that we did not receive direct funding from grants will be covered by the Reserve for Technology account. The insurance line is currently over, but we are awaiting reimbursements from the waste transfer station, library, and police outside services that are not due until the end of the year, which will more than cover that. And if you look at the detail in the insurance line, you will see those numbers represented and the numbers that we're expecting in. Next is the Registrar of Voters. Their overall budget is over, and this is one of the line items we will need to address at year end. We have applied all applicable grants to the line items in their budget. If you remember, we received a number of small grants from the Secretary of State's office totaling about $16,000. And that money was split between the Registrar of Voters, the town clerk, and technology. So everything that we could apply to the Registrar of Voters was applied. So the remainder of the costs associated with the election will need to be covered at year end. At the moment, we are only talking $2,000. So hopefully that number won't grow too much by the end of the year.
I wouldn't expect there'd be too much variance in that between now and the end of the year.
Right, it's just some time in the office for the registrars. Next is the building department. So although it's not over budget, as of the report you have in front of you, it will be over at year end due to the need for additional help in that department, which was covered by contracted services. So these contracted services were approved this year, knowing that we would need additional funds. So we will need to cover those through a transfer at year end. The fire department is currently overdrawn, but we have some offsets from the SAFER grant and from FEMA covering some of their overtime expenses that have not yet been applied. It is likely, however, that this budget will still be overdrawn, mainly due to some extraordinarily high vehicle maintenance costs and also operating costs to replace supplies in the ambulance. The health department is overdrawn, and you'll probably think that that is due to COVID, but it's actually mainly due to the need to replace the outgoing health director with an incoming health director at the same time. So what we normally do is when we have an outgoing employee, especially a department head, if they have some vacation payout time, we normally wait to hire their replacement until that money is extinguished through the budget. But with COVID, we were unable to do that. So we had to hire our health director at the same time that Dennis was still here. So at the end of the year, I will be requesting a transfer from reserve from personnel to cover those vacation payout that is really bringing this line over at the moment. Youth and Family Services is also over budget, but they have grant offsets that have not been transferred. And when they're done at the end of the year, that overage will be covered. So the biggest item I wanted to discuss was a capital budget. If you look at that, it looks like it is overdrawn by quite a bit, but there are a number of adjustments that we are making to these. The first item is an ambulance. If you remember earlier in the year, the ambulance was in an accident and it is being replaced. We've issued a purchase order for the replacement of the ambulance and the stair chair that were both totaled during that accident. We have received reimbursement from KERMA for all but a $500 deductible, and those payments will be applied to this expenditure, so it will no longer be overdrawn, or if it is, it'd be just by the deductible. There's a $13,000 purchase order shown for the GIS upgrade, which we have closed this purchase order. The reason for that is the project was originally approved to be paid through funds held over from a prior year purchase order. So a new purchase order shouldn't have been opened. So we've closed that and we've applied this expense to a prior year purchase order, therefore not showing an overage on that line. You'll also see in the Safe Streets line, there's $210,000 contract that is in place for consulting services. This contract was awarded with the anticipation of using the Transportation Plan Reserve Fund. So that will be another transfer at year end. Those are monies specifically set aside for that purpose. Park and Rec purchased a tractor this year with funds held over from last year. That money was placed into carried in force, and they were asked to hold off to pay for that tractor with those funds. So in order to cover that expense, we'll need a transfer at year end for that as well. The final cost of the planning and zoning codification project, the final $50,000 was set aside in reserve for codification. That expense has been done this year, so that transfer will also be requested to cover that. So once these 5 items are taken care of, the balance in the capital budget will actually be $304,000 to the good, which will be available to cover the final capital expenditures for this year, a few of which were approved this morning at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. So overall, our expenses are right where I really expect them to be at this time. I'll open up for any other questions for any other line items or anything specific.
Covered that very well, Mary Jane.
Anyone?
Well, thank you.
We move on to special funds. Don't hold anybody up. Are there any other questions on revenues or expenditures for the town? None. I could find what I was looking for here. And one question on the special fund as it applied to Sawmill Bridge. I'm wondering with this current expenditure of $120,000, how much is left in that project? How much is still required to be spent?
Yeah, I'd have to look that up. Ken, I don't have that number in front of me, but I can look that up and certainly get that out to you tomorrow. But it's
Ken,
quite a bit.
We have a lot left to expend on that. We only shut down the roadway a couple of months ago and just started this project. So
Right.
I can get that out to you tomorrow.
I had a couple of questions on warrants. Does anyone else have any? No. I can find them. Just the things I just did not understand. Like page 52. I see an item for quality data services for $8,000.
That's the expense for the postage for sending out the tax bills.
Mhm. Okay, one other one. Page 40. Certified laboratories for public works.
testing.
What was that one for? About $3,400.
Testing.
I'd have to look that up specifically to see what repair that was, but it was a repair that was done.
It said equipment repair and maintenance. I guess that's for,
Yeah, I'd have to look up the detail
okay, that's
to
all
see
that I-
specifically what that was on.
Oh, I was kind of curious on page 22. There were a few that I marked off. 4-figure numbers about.
Page
comparing
22,
tech-
Bob.
22, page 22. There's one that caught my eye. I'm just curious. Wi-Fi access points renewal. Now, is that a hardware thing? I mean, oh no, it's a software license. And support. I didn't know something that gets renewed. I thought once you're in, you're done. I'll have to-
Typically, software licenses are renewed annually. You buy the package and then which gives you the right to then continue to pay the license fee on an annual basis. It's the Microsoft model.
Okay, thank you. Looked odd.
Yeah.
But that's for the schools.
Now, Bob, were you talking about the Connecticut Computer Service?
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually one of our layers of internet and of protection and security.
Okay.
Zip Protect is a service we use that they run. All the emails are run through a third-party service provider to identify spam, phishing, and any malicious malware. So if I open up a a document or a document that comes from outside the system, it gets run through Zix first.
Oh, so that's how that works, because I know we were sending, yeah, okay. Thank you.
It's above my pay grade. I have to talk to Tony, but
No, I know just what I remember we talked about it once and you just closed the circle for me. Thank you.
you're
Yeah,
welcome.
it's meant to catch spam before it gets to our inboxes.
It's more than just spam. It's all the malicious stuff too.
Right.
There any comments on the medical benefits line?
Could be. None other than the Board of Selectmen discussed this morning that given the healthy cushion that's in that account, we'd like to have ongoing further discussions with the Board of Finance relative to allocating some more of that significant surplus to the OPEB trust going forward.
Okay,
And the timing on that would be right at the end of the cycle, so that there's
Yep.
nothing hanging in a breeze, right?
Exactly. Oh, yeah, Bobby, we definitely would not. You know, who knows what the June numbers are going to look like.
Right.
there's one happy set of numbers, which is building permits, which apparently we hit a 13-year high. It's not an enormous number, but with 30 permits issued in this current year in 11 of the 12 months, we haven't had such activity since 2007 and 8.
Yeah, and as I think you saw earlier in the revenue discussions, building revenue has already exceeded their budget by over $40,000. And the most recent month in May, we collected $75,000 in building fees. I think it's reflective of a couple of things. One, the new fees that we put in place prior to this budget, and then secondly, just the amount of activity that's going on. Ironically, during the COVID situation, I think a lot of people spent a lot of time in their homes and said, we have to do something else. And because I think the numbers you're looking at, Ken, are just new building, new housing starts.
Yeah. New housing starts.
But also
There's a lot more building activity.
Right.
in addition to the revenue, that also is one of the reasons why we have Dennis Johnson continuing on staff, because there's health inspections and things like that associated with it. And we've got the higher building expenses because having those people in the department is allowing us to generate the building permits. So one hand kind of washes the other in that respect, because we've got to have the staff on board to turn these things around as quickly as the homeowners and the contract completed.
Yeah, well said, Jeff. Thank you.
I think that brings us to Mary Ann's memorandum, which the Board of Selectmen. Right.
Ken, I need to have you approve my warrant. If you could approve before you move on to the next item. So
Thank you. We should
whereas
approve-
you acknowledge the Board of Ed, I need approval on mine or else we can't send out checks tomorrow.
We don't want that to happen. Okay, the number that I have here, I hope it's the correct number, is $1,749,487. That is correct.
Yes.
1 for 2. Okay. That's the total of the submissions from the town. Do I have a motion to approve that number?
So moved.
Second,
Those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? No. That number is approved. We now go on and ask you about your memorandum.
So that, coming forward today with a transfer for the revaluation. You will not see this represented in the general fund as the revaluation has its own separate fund. If you remember, we did put $425,000 or $450,000 aside into a committed fund balance reserve to cover the anticipated cost of the upcoming revaluation. We have signed a contract and issued a purchase order for $324,113. So I am looking for a transfer from that committed reserve for revaluation into the revaluation fund as noted on my memo.
Okay, you all have a copy of that memo? Is there any discussion of that? Do we need to read your resolution? I think you've told us. So I don't think it's necessary to read it into the record. We have the memorandum. Are there any questions about this memo?
I just have one question. It's probably not so related to the transfer, but I was curious, do we bid on that service for them to do the
Yes, we did.
appraisal? Oh, okay. Sorry, just a little side question. No problem with the
It's okay.
transfer.
Good question.
Those in favor of the transfer?
Aye. So moved.
Second.
Okay, I
I,
I
think it's unanimous. It's approved.
Thank you all.
Are there any committee reports? Any old business? Any new business?
I do have something to propose, Mr. Vice Chairman. I brought this up with Mr. Ailes a while back, and he encouraged me to bring this to the board. Simply that one of the best educations I had in town was on the facilities task force, and we all went on a tour of town facilities. And it just takes a couple of hours, and you get local guides, and you go see places like Public Works and the Thane property and some of the schools. You look at solar and maybe investigate some of the mysteries of perpetual HVAC problems, and maybe police and fire and all the storage problems we have left, right, and center, maybe the stump dump. It's quite romantic. You know, and
Nothing more romantic than a st-
and it's not, the intention is not, of course, to look over these people's shoulders and start advising them. The intent is just so that we make better decisions, knitting everything together. It makes better sense to us rather than us looking and sitting and looking at numbers, and it makes us more interesting at cocktail parties, so we can tell people in town that we've actually been there and done it. So if this sounds like something we'd like to do, I'd be happy to organize this. Typically, you get Steve Neidorf to go along and kind of point and talk about things, and you step right in, you see the department heads in their setting, and they tend to welcome the engagement. It would mean, however, you know, everyone getting together and giving up a morning or a few hours of a day that needs to be arranged. That's the biggest issue with it.
I really like this idea, Rob. I think I really enjoy that and become more familiar with facilities I haven't seen.
Yeah.
I'm glad to say I haven't seen the inside of the police station yet, so can leave that one out, but I wouldn't mind seeing the rest of the buildings. And
But your picture's up there.
is it?
I thought that
See,
was at the
they
post office.
must know my
In there.
address.
So I don't quite know how to put this forward in a motion or whatever else, but if anybody wants to help me with this or hold it open for further
I don't think you
discussion.
need
but-
a motion, Bob. I just think you need to go ahead and do it and
Yeah.
then send an email about those of us that want to partake.
While I have most of you here, then are mornings better, weekdays better, Saturdays better, evenings, well, not evenings, afternoons? Does it? Anybody have preferences?
Well, if you do Saturdays, you
We won't see
you know,
some.
the town isn't open, so I think you have to do it in order to have people there Monday through Friday, so.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Bob, what I'd recommend is we'll have staff send out an email to try to schedule it, to narrow it down. And Karen's on this call, and I'm graciously offering her services to help try to coordinate that, because she's so good at it. What you guys don't understand is I don't have control of my calendar. Karen's the only one that's allowed to do that. So, so we'll send out an email asking folks a series of questions, try to narrow it down. I don't know what people's vacation plans are this summertime, but that could be problematic. But we'll make Steve Nydorf available to participate and go around. So we'll take that on to try to get that scheduled.
Good. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Maybe Cliff can help with the Board of Ed, and I'm just throwing it out there. Gary McElhenney, did the same thing with the Board of Selectmen for the Facilities Task Force. So, he was a good resource as well.
Yep. Good. Good.
Okay, was that on a line between old business and new business, Bob?
I thought that was new business, but I'm okay.
New business, okay. Is there any other items to be presented for new business? We'll go to public forum. Is there anyone wishing to address the board in a closing public forum? Not hearing that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi,
Thank you. We are
good night,
Thank you, Mr.
everyone.
Vice Chairman.
And I.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Vice
done,
Chair.
all done.
Well done.
Thank you very much.